Hello and welcome to the MuddyBootz Allotment channel. My name is Nigel, and in this new series, Growing Made Easy, I'll be taking a look at some of the vegetables that I grow in easy to follow steps from sowing the seed right the way up to harvest. If you're short of open space to grow in, don't let that be an excuse not to grow potatoes, because by using large containers and tubs, you can produce a high yielding, good quality crop in a small space such as half a square metre. For a good many years on my allotment, I always grew potatoes in open ground. I had good crops, but the downside of it for me was harvest time. I'd put the fork into the ground and quite often I'd spear a tuber, and more likely than not it was the biggest one of the lot. It's quite annoying really, so I had a look around on YouTube. I was quite surprised to see how many other gardens are actually growing in containers and large pots, and surprisingly big harvests as well. After doing a bit of research, it seemed that the 30-litre container seemed the popular one for growing the potatoes in. So I made an initial purchase of 12 and I grew my first earlies in there. I had surprisingly quite a good crop. You may think that 12 buckets of 30 litres, 360 litres, is quite a lot of compost. But the way I got round that, I used horse manure in the bottom, probably about the first 15 centimetres, and then the top layer I used old potting compost and a mixture of proprietary compost together with, sometimes I'll put potato granular fertiliser in and top the buckets like that, which worked out less expensive. And say the crop was good, so the following year I bought another 24 and managed to grow my second earlies and also the main crops in. Growing potatoes in containers has a number of advantages for me, obvious one being harvesting. But I tend to keep my crops in the ground longer than normal. Main crops can be in as late as March. In fact, I've still got 7 or 8 containers of soy palmito ready to be evacuated now. The advantage of that is you're not tying the ground up. With potatoes in the ground, you have to wait until obviously you've lifted them before you can use it. Whereas now, I can just move those containers to a different position and start preparing the ground ready for the crop next year. The big advantage I saw came at Christmas this year. A few days before that, we had some severe frosts and the ground was rock solid. Now I'd got potatoes that I wanted to harvest. Being in the ground, I'd have been digging solid ground. As it was, I just went to the container. The first inch or so was a bit of frost on the top, but once I tipped the container upside down, the soil below was nice and crumbly and I was able to pick out the tubers easily. The road for every potato's journey on its way to reproduction begins with the tubers producing little shoots known as chits, spruts or sprouts. It's a controversial thing whether we should encourage it or let them get on with it once you've planted them. So once we've made the decision if we're going to do chitting or not, we'll have a look at the containers and the soil we're going to be using. Today we're going to be planting potatoes in containers and buckets. You can of course grow them directly into the soil, and there's pitfalls and benefits using both methods based around similar criteria. Watering can be an issue when grown in containers, so you must keep on top of that, don't let them dry out, whereas in the ground natural rainfall usually takes care of them. The big benefit of containers for me is harvesting. It's a matter of lifting the container up, emptying out the contents and picking out your rewards. With growing in the ground, you have to use a fork or something to lift them up, and there is a danger of spearing them. The other benefit of growing in containers as well, you got slightly less chance of getting damaged by slugs or other pests. And here are the first set of tubers ready for planting out. This is a first early variety called Swift. and you can of course get second early and main crop. They're basically grouped around the time it takes them to fully mature and crop. In America and Canada way, they're known as determinate and indeterminate, but they're similar classified groups. Notice the small growth on the top here. These are called chits or spruts or sprouts, and all that is an indicator of how many stems the tuber is actually going to throw up. There's an argument, some people say that's not necessarily to sprout them, but for first and second earlies I tend to do that, and main crop I just leave them as is. The compost that I'm using is actually out of last year's potato buckets, but I will add a few additions. There's some bloodfish and bone there, a few handfuls there, and together with this stuff, it's called Orgrow. It's organic manure, and that will help retain moisture as well as feed. To start off, I'm going to put a layer of horse manure in the bottom, followed by a layer of the soil mix that we've prepared with the additives. So now we come to the exciting part of planting. These are first early potatoes. The variety is called Swift, which are fairly fast cropping. I use the handles as a guide for the first layer. Just put them in line, just gently nestle them into the compost. With that layer in, now we put the second lot of potatoes in, again diametrically opposite each other at 90 degrees to the first lot. Just sink them down gently, like that. Now what I'm going to do now is top the bucket up. Just leave it short of the rim, and that will retain any water we use later on. So there we have it. So there's a little rim there just to retain the water. This will actually sink a little bit during the season, but that will be okay. One more final thing we must do, and that's add the label. These will be placed out onto the beds now and watered, left. Do keep your eye out in case we do have some frost, because it will nip the foliage. But apart from that, about 12 weeks time, we'll have a look, see what we've got. So that's the 12 containers of potato Swift, first early. This is the bed, say, but they'll be spread out a little bit farther. The reason I've put them this close for the time being is if we have a frost, it's easy to pop a cover over the top. So the 12 there, and this afternoon I did another 12 there, and those are the Charlottes. The ones in the corner of the sarpos drying out. Hopefully I'll be able to bag those tomorrow. Come on, first thing this morning, and the fox has paid me a visit into the potatoes, and he's really done some damage looking on these here. I think what it is, you can smell the bloodfish and bone. So I'll be putting covers over these. I'll just double check, make sure the tubers are still in, and then I'll be covering these over the top, probably with a bit of mesh or something. When you look at the depth of that footprint, there must have been some decent sized fox on there. What I'm going to do is group the pots closer together all on the one side, and I'm going to pop that builder's debris netting across the top. Hopefully that should keep them out. Hopefully that'll do the trick. If not, we'll have to think of some more drastic measures. one of the biggest issues people find when growing in containers, particularly during the first year, is maintaining a steady and constant watering regime. Now this can be an issue, particularly if you haven't got quick access to your allotment or wherever your containers are. You should never ever let the potatoes go short of water. You'll see them wilting, and this can often quite lead to disease in them. There are many ways of getting around of it. One of it is adding humus to the soil. That could be in well-rotted compost or manure. But the way I find best, and it works for me, is to add in a good thick layer of straw on the top of the buckets, which adds a mulch. And by watering, the water goes through, and the layer of straw then prevents the water from evaporating so quickly. When I put the potatoes out, I did put a cover over the top just in case we had any frosts. And this morning I thought I'd take the covers off and give them water. And boy, did I have a surprise. These are the first early, the Swift variety. These are like this in just over 2 weeks. They've gone a bit pale and spindly because obviously they've been undercover. But watered them, take the covers off now. I will probably put the builder's mesh overnight just to get the fox off. But where we've got these little depressions in the bucket there, we've had a manure delivery a week or two ago, a lot of straw in, so I'm going to get some of the straw and actually top the buckets up with the straw. And that will also help retain some of the moisture. So that's all the first early's done. I've given them a few cans of water on the top just to hold the straw down. I'll probably give them a better watering tonight with the hose pipe. Just looking at the second earlies here, the Charlottes, I noticed a few of them are starting to poke their heads up, so I might as well lift the covers off and get the straw down on these as well. Just taking the coverings off my potatoes, and as you can see here, even with 3 layers of debris net on, the foliage has caught it where it's been pressing against the netting. It does get really cold down on my pot because it's probably the lowest one on the old allotment site, and a couple of mornings the soaking trays I have on here have had a good thick sheet of ice on top. But I think they'll pick up, there shouldn't be no issue with those. These are the first earlies, the Swift, and those there are the Charlottes. Just going to put them now into the tray of wheelbarrow. Whoa, that looks somewhat decent so far. Blimey, big potatoes. Been probably left a little bit too long, the size of some of these, but even so. These have not been fed at all, I think I put 6x manure in with the original compost and the 2 tubers. I think that's about it. This is a 30 litre bucket, and that's what we've got through so far. If I do get a chance, I'll put them on the scales when we get into the kitchen. Still got about 12 to 15 buckets of Charlotte potatoes to be harvested in here, so I think I'm going to get them out before the rain comes and then dry them off, and I'll just stack the pots down the bottom Also give me a chance to get this bed weeded. That there's the harvest from the first bucket, and surprisingly, for being so long in the bucket, they're really good condition. Just as a measure of scale, behind it is a 3-inch pot. Not actually what the weight is. I'm not even going to weigh them because I've got lots of other buckets to turn out, but that gives you an idea. Hopefully the rest of the buckets will return as good as that. I've dried and brushed the dirt off most of the Charlottes now. That's a 25 kilogram bag. It's quite near the top, done really well. Bit of scab on some of them, but nothing to worry about, they'll soon scrape off. And so that's a decent crop of potatoes throughout the bucket, that is not too bad. So that's the harvest of that 30 litre container we've had. As you can see, there's some decent sized tubers in here. Just an example of what can be achieved from a container of 30 litres. So you don't necessarily need a large expanse of open ground to grow potatoes. I shan't be bothered weighing these, but I can tell you now there's a fair bit of weight in there. So from 30 litre containers you can grow something like this. Well, that just about wraps it up, folks. I do hope you've enjoyed it and got something out of it, particularly the newer growers we have on YouTube now. I have got quite a lot more of this style to release, covering other different vegetables that I grow on my allotment. If you've not already subscribed, there's a button down the corner. Click on that, and also click on the bell, and that will notify you when I upload a new video. So many thanks for watching. I'm Nigel Dukes. You've been watching MuddyBootz Allotment.